congratulations on the film. I wanted to begin by asking you if you could tell us a little bit more about Cody Greenwood and her mum living on the island before the studio was made, and how she overheard her mum say one day to the guys making the studio, why isn't anyone making a movie about this?
Yeah, it's a quite amazing story. So Cody's mum, Frenae Lassac, who's an artist, she went down to Montserrat, I guess around the late 70s, and she was kind of, living down there doing art, and I think she was, dating a musician at the time, and they just wanted to get away from London. And then George Martin came down and built the studio, and so Frenae, became friends with a lot of the bands that were down there, a lot of the locals and a lot of the people. And then I think it was probably about 4 years ago, two of the guys who built the studio, Malcolm and Dave, they were in Perth visiting Cody's mum and just talking around a dinner table and talking about the studio, and Cody just said, why hasn't anyone made a film on this? And I think that's where the idea stemmed from, and then I think for her it was a long process to kind of get, the blessing from the estate, and, get in touch with all the people in Montserrat. She spent a lot of time there as a kid. She would go there on her school holidays, and so she knew, a lot of the people as well in the town.
I think I remember you mentioning that it took around like a year, and the fact that, and her first interview was with Sting to produce this trailer.
She had this incredible pitch document that was like 80 pages of every band that went down there, kind of every story she knew about. It was like the most insane kind of research document I'd read. And she interviewed Sting and kind of cut like a sizzle reel together. And then from that, they went and, talked to Universal and got the film financed. And then I was in Toronto Film Festival with a short film when she was there doing meetings for the film. And then, we talked about me coming on board to direct, and then it all happened very quickly.
You've said in an interview something I don't know a lot about. I like to go in naive. So if you could tell us more about how you got involved and joined Cody on Under the Volcano, and tell this extraordinary story of George Martin's iconic studio.
Yeah, well, I think when I say going in naive to things, obviously that's not my era. I wasn't born in that time. I, know the bands as much as anyone in my generation does, unless they're super fans. So for me, I think I'm always interested by things I don't know much about, because then I feel like you can kind of, ask people questions just as you would if you're interested in something or someone. So I think that was kind of, how I like to conduct interviews. Obviously, I'm very well prepared, and, we research a lot of stuff, and I think you learn a lot also from interviews. Sometimes you might interview somebody and they might not even make the cut of the film in the end, but from that you learned something else and got more inside information, or, but usually the interviews are around an hour. People always are shocked when they go, oh, I'm not in the film much. And you're like, well, no, there's 35 interviews, and it's an hour and a half film.
And you've mentioned also before that if you get an ace, you get everyone else. It's like a psychological game trying to get these people in the movie. Who was your ace?
Our ace would have been Paul McCartney for sure. Sting was an ace. Seems so bad to rank these guys because they've all, and women because they've all got such amazing high profiles. But I guess I'd done a documentary called The Last Impresario, which was about a theatre producer, and that had a lot of, celebrities in it. And it's that thing where, when I was like 24 and making it, you could email and say, oh, I've interviewed Yoko Ono and Naomi Watts. And so all of a sudden it had more clout. And so, I said to Cody, if we just go for the big dogs first, and if we get, some of those people on board, we obviously had Sting, then it kind of helps because, people come on board when they go, oh, it's a real project, they're serious, it's happening. And there were some people we missed out on and, got so close to getting. And then I think with the timing of COVID, our last interview was in December 2019 with Mark Knopfler. And then we came back and I think interviewed Elton John's band, and they were in Australia, and we were really trying for a long time to get Elton. But at the same time, there's, Paul McCartney and Elton, their interviews back in the day kind of take you back and make you feel like you're back in the day there with them. So we found some, good We had a great archive producer, Lisa Savage, and we had some great, interviews. She always says it's really good to find interviews when bands and artists are touring to small countries sometimes, because people are a bit more off the cuff. So I think that interview with Elton was from New Zealand TV.
Was there any interviews that, Lisa Savage, like you mentioned, your archive producer, that all of you sort of worked together and found that you thought, wow, that is fantastic, but it didn't make the cut in the film?
I mean, I really liked all the personal archive footage. So Stuart Copeland, he'd shot a bunch of stuff down there on Super 8. So I always think like that kind of stuff for me is a more personal, Paul McCartney gave us his home video footage that he shot down there. So stuff like that's amazing, because it's like their home videos.
Yeah, was there like things like with their family?
Yeah, I think especially the Paul McCartney video, had George in it, dancing around the house, and just kind of been feeling a bit more like of a snapshot of what it was like down there. So it was, it was really hard, because a lot of people didn't have, bring a lot of, we'd be trying for a long time to ask people, do you remember, and then there'd be stuff we'd find, like Nick Rhodes's, I think, ex-wife or wife, someone had talked about them all being 21 when Duran Duran were down there. And then, she happened to have a few photos of that 21st birthday with the cake. And, so you'd find someone would scan like 3 photos and email them, and you'd get so excited. And they'd just be like, oh, that was just, some of my family photos.
You have forgotten to mention one person that was your ace, and that was Tappy the chef.
Yeah, Tappy was amazing. He actually, I made Cody a deck of cards for her birthday, and he actually is an ace on it. I think he's the ace of spades. But everyone had talked about him, and Cody had already been trying to track him down for years, and somehow we got his number, and he worked in a hospital in Boston, I think, and Cody called him and said, why don't we fly you out to LA? And he'd never been to LA before. And so we were with him for 4 days, and he was so sweet. He wanted to go to the Hollywood sign, and it was like 100 degrees, and that's like an hour away. And he wanted to, walk around Venice and buy T-shirts for his family. And he was so sweet, because we'd heard he was so crazy, like this crazy guy. So we were expecting this super crazy energy. But he was just so lovely. And, I kept on thinking, it must have been such an amazing experience for the, people who worked in the studio as well, like Desmond and X, who, were the bartenders. They had songs written about them, and they did, backing vocals with the Police. And, and it was nice to see them kind of reflect on that period in their life.
Let's go on to the Martin Offler interview. And what happened with the SD card, and what is the story about this freezer?
I think one day a camera card just decides to die, and we'd been in London interviewing Nick Rhodes, and we had dinner with Mark Knopfler's, someone who worked at Mark Knopfler's studio. And then we'd had a lot of people, we'd tried for years to get him. And then all of a sudden we got back to Australia, and they said, look, Mark can do Wednesday. So we went back to London, which was excruciating, to interview him. And and then we did the interview, and I was flying to New York, and we had a meeting, and I wasn't feeling well. So I was like, oh, Cody, go to the meeting, I'll do the data. And then as I was transferring the card, I was like, it was there, but it just wouldn't do anything. So I was there for about 3 hours, and Cody's texting me saying, have you got it? Have you got it? And I was like, yeah, it's like, I don't know. So we took the card back to Australia, and I think, we'd hired the cards from a TV studio that obviously use cards every day when they're filming, and dump the cards and reuse them. And it's just one of those things where it died, but we knew the interview was there. So we tried someone in Australia for a week to extract it minute by minute, and then the file got sent to Hong Kong and sat in a freezer for 10 days. But we delivered the film in the meantime to Screen Australia, just in the close-up of Mark Knopfler. And they were like, oh, is that another angle you did? And we were like, oh, we just thought it was like more intimate. And then we put it in when we got it. So that was scary, because I'd never messed up an interview before, and it was something that was kind of like out of our control, and just like really, really bad luck. But yeah.
You got a fan question. Any musicians you had a crush on that you interviewed and it was the highlight of your life?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we'd play Fuck, Marry, Kill. just when we were on a bus between all the interviews, but that would change. A crush on anyone.
And who was the crush?
I enjoyed interviewing. I really enjoyed interviewing Andy Summers and Stuart Copeland. Just as like, I think Andy was, wasn't sure when he went into the interview, and I felt like it was a really good, I felt like Mark Knopfler was, I don't know, not nervous, but just quiet before the interview, and by the end it was like, let's all go have lunch and whatever, and we didn't. But I enjoyed interviewing Jimmy Buffett as well. There was a lot of people, I think a lot of the locals down there, like Danny Sweeney, the windsurfer, was just like, his interview just went way left field. Couldn't even repeat some of the things he said, but pretty classic.
And I'm gonna ask just one last question before we go. You are making a documentary with your dad, Gracie Otto. Anything you can tell us before we say goodbye?
Yeah, it's a really personal documentary that, I don't think will be finished in the next year, but slowly, as my dad, reaches the end of everything, just following him around. He's an actor, and trying to find another documentary with Cody at the moment.
Nice. Well, look, we look very forward to watching it all. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you.
And good luck with it all.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
You too.